get started. First of all, good morning, everyone. My name is Rob Williams. I serve as Director of SourceLink. For those of you who may not be familiar with SourceLink, we help communities build vibrant entrepreneurial communities through our consulting technology and peer learning opportunities like today. The last few months, as many of you know, we've been hosting a series of recovery and resiliency webinars, and this is kind of the latest in that series. It's also very poignant given the time right now and what's going on. I'm so excited to welcome the best of the best experts when it comes to inclusive ecosystem building and economic development. Stephanie DeVane, Dell Gines, Rodney Sampson, and Lomax Campbell. I'll just give a quick little bit of background about each of our guests today, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lomax to go ahead and jump right into the content, as I know you're all very eager also to get rolling. Stephanie is a management executive for the National Urban League Small Business and Entrepreneurship Program. In that role, she provides management, oversight, and advocacy on behalf of the entrepreneurship centers located in critical affiliate locations. And I do want to ask everyone to go ahead and please mute your microphone for right now, just to avoid any disruptions. Stephanie and her division are really leading all of the granting of funds, training, technical assistance to all of those centers. Stephanie and the National Urban League Network have advanced tens of thousands of African-American entrepreneurs. She's amazing, and I cannot wait for you all to be able to hear from her experiences and the experiences of her on-the-ground centers that have been doing this work for a very long time. Dell Gines is Senior Community Development Advisor for the Federal Reserve Bank of Kansas City. He's responsible for the community development, small business, and economic development work. While at the KC Fed, Dell has written 3 guides, an ebook, and a bunch more research on inclusive economic development, entrepreneurship-led economic development, inclusive ecosystem building, and so much more. He's one of my favorite speakers to watch, and you're all very, very fortunate to have him here to contribute his thoughts. Next, we have Rodney Sampson. He is a tech entrepreneur, author, and angel investor, and executive chairman and chief executive officer of Opportunity Hub. Rodney has taken a lot of the experience, his own experience, the research, the best practice learnings, and has forged just this incredible platform to empower change with OHub. I'll let him talk a little bit more about it, but you're in for a treat there too. And then last we have, before I switch to, it's worth noting that Rodney and Dell literally wrote the book on building entrepreneurship ecosystems in communities of color. And I will share a link to that PDF here in the chat so that you can all read it if you haven't read it yet. And then last, and serving as our moderator and our fourth panelist today, is Dr. Lomax Campbell. Lomax is director of the Mayor's Office of Community Wealth Building in Rochester, New York. I love this. He describes himself as a scholar practitioner, and he absolutely is. 17 years of experience in small business entrepreneurship, higher education, government administration. He recently celebrated the launch of Nexus I-90 with the implementation team, which is at its core an inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem solution for the Finger Lakes region of New York. We have so much ground today. We're so happy that everyone is here. We're so fortunate to have 4 amazing folks to talk on this topic of inclusive economic development and entrepreneurial ecosystem building. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lomax so that we can get going.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rob, and good afternoon for some and good morning for the rest of you beautiful people. So excited to be with you all here today. I appreciate the quick introduction that Rob provided for all of us, but I know I want to do another quick little lightning round, 1 minute or less from each of our panelists to just go a little bit deeper on some aspect of what they've done in their communities or in their work that they're proud of that we should know about before jumping into the actual questions. And I'm going to start with my sister friend here, Miss Stephanie.
Thank you very much, Lomax, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. It's great to see everybody's faces. I hope everybody is well. At the National Urban League, as Rob has said, my responsibility is to oversee our entrepreneurship centers, and I think that the work that we do is highly impactful because we're embedded in communities of color where people who have not traditionally had access to certain tools and information are provided with those skill sets that they need. Our mission is really to work with those business owners to either help them create, grow, or scale their businesses. And our real end goal is to provide jobs in those underserved communities, thereby creating wealth in those communities, which we think is very important. And it's through those skills and tools that they have not had access to that they're able to develop, grow, and add to the economy. So we're very proud of the work that we're doing at the National Urban League, and welcome to everybody. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Stephanie. And we'll do the same. We'll go over to Dell next to just share something that he's done in his work that he's proud of or excited about that we should all know about here before we get into the questions.
Sure. Hey, Lomax, let me know if you get an echo, and I'll put my headphones back on, but I've been having some tech issues. Yeah, like Lomax or Rob mentioned, you know, I've been working on entrepreneurship ecosystem work for the past 10 years, literally since I started at the Fed the day after Martin Luther King Day, 2011, actually. So going on 10 years. And a lot of early stage, you know, work has matured in urban and rural communities. And we really did kind of a hard pivot in 2000, probably I would say, 16, you know, towards being more specific about, you know, ecosystem building in communities of color. You know, then I started working with Rodney on, you know, a wide variety of projects since then, and a lot of different things. I mean, and all this really was motivated, even coming into the Fed, from my work in Omaha, where, you know, I used to be a business banker. I ran a small business incubator and micro lender, and looking at, you know, the challenges of our Black community where I still live, and seeing that, you know, none of the solutions that we were applying, you know, were working. So really looking at and continue to ask the question as to, you know, how do you really create economies in these communities that allow those communities to have a measure of economic power, which leads into other forms of power, and even some of the issues of social justice I'm sure we're going to talk about today. So it's been a great ride, and it's allowed me to meet a lot of people, a lot of you on this call, I'm sure. Like, I see Denisse Rodriguez from Comina. I heard you had a baby. Congratulations. First, I see
Lovely to
Penny.
see you.
Yeah, to Penny, Dara, Pam Bishop, a lot of other people. Connie. It's great to be here and to, you know, continue to support you all as we work to really build this field that we call entrepreneurship ecosystem. But I think the important thing is that, and I think we'll get into this, is that, you know, this concept of inclusivity has to be ingrained in the field. It has to be part of the development of the field and not an add-on like it is in other fields. And I'm sure we'll get in that today. So I'll turn it back over to you, Lomax.
All right.
Excellent. And thank you so much for those insights, Dale. We're going to come back to economic power a little bit later. Rodney, your turn. Talk to us a little bit about something you're passionate about in your work or proud of that we should know about for the benefit of the body here.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. It's definitely a pleasure to see some familiar faces and also a lot of new faces as well. I hope you all are doing well, considering these very, very unprecedented times that we are navigating. We are navigating global pandemic. We're navigating a race reckoning, and we're also navigating an accelerated push and drive towards our workforce into the fourth industrial revolution. So a lot of things are going on simultaneously. One of the things I say I'm proud of is building the framework alongside Dell Gines of what does it actually look like, take to build an inclusive, authentically inclusive entrepreneurship ecosystem in communities of color. And I've just dropped a link in the chat that gives you a little bit of intel on OHUB's journey to date that was just released in a case study from the Brookings Institution. But looking back 7 years since we launched Opportunity Hub, I'm quite just humbled and excited to be able to work with like Brookings and SourceLink and the Federal Reserve Bank on really codifying our thesis for building racial equity in the technology and startup ecosystem in particular. So excited to be here and look forward to the dialogue today. Thank you.
Excellent, and true to form, since Rob voluntold me to be the fourth unofficial panelist, I have the distinct, but certainly not unique, vantage point of functioning both as a serial entrepreneur, someone who come from higher education administration, and also scholar practitioner. That's kind of what I use there to describe my research and practice in the space around building culturally congruent organizations and systems. And so this is one of those spaces where cultural congruency is vital. But also I work as a public administrator as my day role, where it's been fascinating to see the city of Rochester under Mayor Lovely Ann Warren's leadership push to foster an entrepreneurial ecosystem that serves the city and its residents, where the city of Rochester is a minority majority city, about 63% of our population being not white. And on top of that, haven't been able to bring a racial equity lens to the work by having about 85 people participate cross sectors, cross organizations in 3 2.5-day Undoing Racism workshops administered by the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. That's been powerful in helping to shape minds and policy, quite frankly, around our partner, resource partner networks in the Finger Lakes region. And so we're excited, and thank you all again for joining us today. I'll give you a little bit of the lay of the land. We were told that today is supposed to be somewhat of a semi-formal or semi-structured conversation. And so certainly we have a bank of questions here, but certainly if you all have questions, feel free to post them in the chat, and one of our chat warriors will make sure they feed them to us at the appropriate times, and we'll be able to lift those up. And so with that, we're going to get into the first important question, and we're going to start a little light with the easy questions, and we're going to get to the more challenging and rigorous ones that really make folks think. So the first one, and any of our panelists can start, why is this work important to you, and why should it be a critical focus for all of us as we do the things that we do in our communities?
I think, I think I touched on a little bit. What most people don't know about Omaha, Nebraska is that 13% of our population is which is the same as the national average, is Black Americans, African Americans. And in 2008, and those of you who have heard me speak at the eShip Summit, I think last year may have heard this. In 2008, a Pew survey came out that said, the number one childhood African American poverty rate in the nation was in Omaha, and the number 3 adult poverty rate for African Americans is in Omaha. Most people don't think about that because they don't think about Black people being in Omaha in the first place, and then they don't know the number, and then they don't think about the disparities, with Warren Buffett, coming from here, Fortune 500 companies, et cetera. So, being born and raised and still living in this community, especially coming at it from an economic lens, you kind of start seeing how this pattern, is pretty consistent across every place that I've pretty much visited now since I've been at the Fed across the nation in these types of communities. And then it breaks slightly different in other, ethnic minority communities, but the consensus is still that if you're a person of color, the likelihood of you, having a disparate, economic situation is significantly higher. And oftentimes this translates into your entrepreneurship rate. I once wrote a piece that said the greatest economic disparity, or the greatest disparity that's not talked about, is disparity in entrepreneurship rates. You never hear people talking about that when they talk about disparity. They'll talk about household income, labor market discrimination, et cetera. And so this is really a lived experience for me, and being able to bring it into the Fed and work on it. In rural communities, we're just early adopters. So I'll go around the nation in these small rural communities, 1,200 people, the only Black person for a 6-county radius in the entire area, or only person of color in some instances. And we have a great time talking about rural entrepreneurship ecosystem building until I was finally able to get back to what I wanted to do when I first came to the Fed. It was really, a little balance and focusing more on the issues of race and ethnicity and entrepreneurship. So I think it's an overdue conversation. The field, is still a developing field. So there's time to put embedded structures into the field that is just a standard operating procedure versus, like I said before, an add-on. And we all need to work together to make sure that happens. Otherwise, and this is, I used to say 7 to 8 years ago, if we don't do it, what we're going to do is reinforce in our entrepreneurship ecosystems the good old boy network that happened in our corporate settings, where certain types of entrepreneurs receive the majority of benefits, Traditionally, they're not women, they're not minorities. In the same way as in the corporate, emergence in the 80s, we saw the same thing happen, predominantly white male, supported, very little ethnic diversity, and it kind of reinforced itself over time as that kind of development and field emerged. So that's my take on that softball question, I guess, Lomax.
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic and holistic response, and I appreciate it. I want to ask Rodney the same question. Why is this work important to you, and why should it be a critical focus to the rest of us here as we do what we do?
Absolutely. I like to start with the data. And as they say, the data don't lie. When you look at the racial wealth gap, I know there's a lot of talk about that, but when you actually look at the data and you look at by 2053, the projected median wealth of a Black family will be zero. And for a Latinx family, zero by 2073, respectfully. You start to, look at what's the problem that, we're actually solving. And that's what, entrepreneurs, particularly tech entrepreneurs, do is we look to solve problems at scale. It's what we know to do. And, due to automation and artificial intelligence, machine learning, the fourth industrial revolution, all of that, McKinsey recently released a report prior to COVID-19 that 4.5 million jobs occupied by Black people in this country were going to be eliminated. And that's McKinsey's data. When you look at even what Dale and I just, and I'll drop another link in a second, just called out in our report with Brookings, 20% of net new jobs in this country come from high growth startups. 40% come from high growth firms in general. That's 60% of net new jobs. So if you're building community that's not focusing on the majority of net new job creation, you might want to, look at your work long term. And so what drives us is the model of exposing people and then providing them with the skills and the career opportunities, and also simultaneously the entrepreneurship opportunities to be able to actually have work and build businesses in the future of work and, fourth industrial revolution. So 60% of those new net jobs are coming from high growth firms that are being fueled by last year, $131 billion in angel and venture capital. And that's National Venture Capital Association data. So, in the last 20 years, there haven't been 200 Black and brown founders that have raised angel and venture capital. I was actually one of the first in 2000. There've only been 200 in the last, that's not even one a month in the last 20 years, but last year there were 11,000 in America. So 11,000 firms driving 60% of net new jobs. You think about that. Venture capital only represents 3% of the entire capital stack. And so 3% of the capital stack in the macro investment markets in America is driving the firms that are driving 60% of net new jobs. And so what drives us is if we don't ensure that every American is equitably included and given the opportunity to get the exposure, the skills, the career opportunities, the business opportunities, then what we're saying to the majority of America, race and culture aside, is that they won't be able to participate in this new America.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for that, Rodney. I got some follow-up questions I'm going to be coming back to about front-end opportunities and sustainability and the role of data in that picture. But I'm going to come over to Stephanie now. And Stephanie, I believe it's fair to kind of conclude that you and I have been Black all of our lives, correct? It's fair to conclude that. And I know in the mission of Urban League, serving low to moderate income, diverse communities, historically marginalized groups, In Rochester, our Rochester Urban League certainly has what we call the Black Scholars Program, but they also have the contract for the state for the Entrepreneurial Assistance Program, working with Black and Brown and women entrepreneurs. And so why is this work important to you in your unique context, organizational context? And, given your background, why should we care about this? Why should we all be focused on this?
Sure. So I would only add to what my co-panelists had said a couple of things. I mean, at the Urban League, we are absolutely committed to equity and to ensuring that the playing field is level and that everyone has access to all the opportunities. And I think there's a saying about all lifting all boats in a rising tide. So a rising tide lifts all boats, and I think that's pretty critical. I think the focus for us, in addition to job creation, is intergenerational wealth. And I would look at some statistics, and I know we have some folks on the call who are affiliated with Brookings. Brookings has said that white average wealth is about 929 to 930,000, which is heavily influenced, and I'm quoting here, by very rich white families. Although it doesn't characterize a typical experience, it's about 6.5 to 6.7 times greater than Black average wealth, which is about $138,000. And so Americans have an opportunity to pass wealth along to their heirs. That's an opportunity that really hasn't been seen to a great extent in Black and Brown communities. And so we really believe that entrepreneurship is going to, by and through the creation of jobs, also lead to intergenerational wealth, which is very, very important for folks in the communities. And one of the things that we do at the National Urban League through our affiliate network is we provide the comprehensive wraparound services that all folks need to kind of undergird and strengthen their businesses. So we know that if you're a business owner, but you're housing insecure, you can walk into one of our affiliates and you have the opportunity to have services that will help you with your housing needs, that will then put you in a better position financially to worry then and focus on your business. So we provide all of those kind of comprehensive wraparound services that will help to strengthen communities and help to build them. And we really are very committed to focusing on the job creation that we need in these communities and the intergenerational wealth, which puts us on an equal footing with other folks outside of our community. So that's all that I would add.
Excellent, and that's a lot to add. I would minimize that a little bit. It's just as salient as every other comment that's been made so far. So I want to lift that up and say thank you all for answering the easy question, right? Before we go to the more challenging questions, there's a couple of terms that we've tossed around, and I understand that generational wealth was one that was just shared here. If you're not in the economic development space or government space, you may not be familiar with generational wealth. And then also, you have these bodies of thought around diversity, equity, and inclusion that if you're not in the strategic marketing management space or the strategic human resources space, you may not be familiar with these terms. In short, diversity, reflects the broad heterogeneity among humanity and organizations and contexts across regions and so on and so forth. Equity is really about meeting people where they are so that they can have what it is that they're trying to participate in. And inclusion in and of itself is about making sure all perspectives are included, literally, or are part of solutions, decision-making, consideration when policy and resource allocations are made and things of that nature. But now let's put this into context. We're talking about the I word in D&I, or the inclusive aspect of things when we're talking about entrepreneurial ecosystem building. Can you all, and we'll start back with Stephanie just to kind of reverse the order here, can you define, or how would you define, inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem building? And how does that differ from traditional models or approaches to economic development?
Sure. So when I think of inclusive, I think of something that's fair, it's open, it's collaborative, and equitable. And I would boldface equitable. It's about building systems and communities that meet those requirements. And I think tradition, by definition, implies that you're building communities with people that you know, people that look like you, people with whom you have comfort. And what we know is that doesn't always lend itself to diverse ideas, diverse people, diverse experiences. And so I think we want to be talking about equity, because in an equitable space, that's where we have economic impact. That's where the economic impact rises. That's where the barriers to entry and scale, which are non-existent for many minority entrepreneurs, actually break apart. These folks have been systematically left behind. And if you build an open environment that's fair, inclusive, and equitable, then you're more likely to include those people that have been left out. And I think that's very important. So that's when I talk about inclusivity, that's what I'm thinking.
Ashe. And I'm going to move the same question over to Dell, so he can kind of weigh in on how he defined, since he's one of the individuals that literally wrote the book on the subject matter. How would you define inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem building, and how does it differ from traditional economic development?
This is a good question, and I'll let Rodney, jump in as he sees fit too. But because we went a little bit around on the title of the guide, which was the title of the guide. Now y'all need to note this is ecosystem building in communities of color, not inclusive entrepreneurship ecosystem building. So you have to understand that there is a difference, and this is where we've attempted to adopt a lot of language into the economic development and ecosystem space from the corporate world and from the traditional organizational development world, and it's not in alignment. There's some conceptual alignment, but there's not a full alignment. Like within a corporate structure, diversity and inclusion, generally implies that within the framework of that corporation, individuals in that corporation, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, or even some other whatever, throw it in there in the mix, will just have an equal shot within the organization to be upwardly mobile, fully flourishing, all the buzzwords they use in that field. Economic development is different because you have inclusivity, which is, let's say, an African-American entrepreneur having equitable access and, accessible access to the broader ecosystem work. And then you have ecosystem building in the communities of color. And the best way to explain the uniqueness of it is that the community itself needs to be included in the process, the entire community itself. Inclusive ecosystems is the individual from a different race or ethnicity or gender having equitable access within the broader ecosystem and the resources there. That's different than, let's say, a Black Wall Street, which is positively oriented towards economic growth, scalability, and localized Black community power, that then connects into the broader society and influences the economy of the broader society, while also being able to support the personal needs of the entrepreneurs and the community members within that community. So we initially considered using the term inclusivity because it's what everybody's using. There's a common understanding, but when we started boiling down, what we really ended up talking about is how do we create, in this guide, not some of the other things that Rodney has done and some of the other things I've done, but in this guide, it's, if I want to create an ecosystem in a Black community that focuses on Black people and the intersection of the elements that they need within that community so they can participate as a whole community more thoroughly in the broader ecosystem, then how do you do it? So we need to make sure that we're making a clear distinction. So one is explicitly related to Black power. Another is related to an individual Black entrepreneur being able to adequately thrive and then bring that, increased assets, entrepreneurial innovation and wealth back into the community. While they are related, there's two very different strategic and tactical approaches to achieving them. I'll let Rodney take it from there.
Floor is yours, Rodney. Any additional contributions there?
Absolutely. I think Stephanie and Dale laid it up quite nicely. I think, a part of the reality is that if we, as a country, nationally and hyperlocally, are still having conversations about these very core definitions, then the output of diversity, equity, and inclusion is nascent, and so you end up with sort of two approaches, and the two acronyms. One is DAIS. We call it OHUB. It's a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies and solutions. And the reality of it is, until diversity, equity, and inclusion are built into your P&Ls, if it's not transactional, it's just performative and it's just theater. And what usually happens is well-meaning non-Black and brown people will literally drain all your energy for free. And I want to be candid and transparent, to absolve their feelings and their, kind of guilt or fragility. And I'm just going to be honest. We have an honest, home. Y'all in church.
Please do.
So,
Please do.
And I think a part of the challenge with that is, after we exhausted ourselves at the basic levels, if there's no transaction, it's just a kumbaya moment. Everybody feels well, but then you go back to your resources and we go back to nothing. And so I think DAIS is very important, and we should strive, and everyone should definitely strive to understand how to implement DAIS across the 7 functions of your business, from your board, your governance, your human resources at all levels, your procurement, where you purchase, who you purchase from, your product development, your go-to-market, your investment, and your impact. Those are the 7 things that, if you manage a P&L in your organization, that's where your spend is. And if your spend does not include Black people, Latinx people, women, veterans, LGBTQ communities, and the intersectionality of all of that, then it's just diversity theater. So while everyone figures that out, there's the FUBU approach, giving credit to Damon John. There's the for us, by us. That's right. Why there's an OHUB. That's why there's a National Urban League doing this work, rather than us just having head-bumping conversations with the Techstars of the world and the Y Combinators of the world and the CDFIs and the banks and the venture funds of the world. So while we have those conversations, we'll be over here, like Tyler Perry said, building our own. And I think that's right. That's sort of the balance between making mainstream ecosystems inclusive. Like Janice Bryan Howroy, good friend and colleague, says, she says, diversity is getting an invitation to the dance. Inclusion is being able to help choose the playlist, but equity is being able to make a part of the door and the board and then the bar and the corporate sponsorships, right? And so while y'all figure that out, we over here building our own.
That's right. That's right. I appreciate that. Brother Rodney's keeping it real today. I love that. And just on the topic of terms, we live in a socially constructed world because we're social creatures. And so we have these terms that, start out as very nebulous, that someone advances and they're kind of like the lone wolf trying to convince everybody to subscribe to it. And eventually things kind of clean up. And by the time they solidify, we're on to new terms. I just completed a program over at an executive education program over at Harvard Kennedy School of Government called Leading Economic Growth. And in this 10-week online program, I learned a little bit about the Scrabble theory of economic development, where they talked about people as person bytes, and each of us knows 1 person byte worth of information. And the number of different person bytes that you have and that you can configure allows you to produce different things. And so in that course, they talked about equitable growth and social inclusion as desired outcomes. And I'm bringing this to the conversation as the whole purpose of building inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem building is to ultimately spark equitable growth and social inclusion so that our very country can live up to all of the promises that it put forth in its identity and creed and so on and so forth. And so I just wanted to bring that. And this is me adding my contribution here to the definition. Traditional models tend to be extractive. economically speaking, and top down. Whereas these other models, whether it's the FUBU approach or if it's an inclusive mainstream activity, tends to be bottom up, and it allows more people to take part in the economy in more sustainable ways. And so I just wanted to bring that. So let's move on to a slightly more challenging question. And we can start with anybody if anybody's volunteering to jump out here first. But how are the needs different? I know Dell earlier talked about being the lonely only for a while in business in his community, but how are our needs, whether we're Black, Latino, disabled, LGBT, veteran, woman, et cetera, how are our needs fundamentally different? And because of that, how might they demand different approaches to meeting our needs and making us successful in business?
Well,
50-pounder here.
I think you need. I think the question needs to be inducted. It's not about how are they different. It's how do we discover the differences and similarities and create a constructive strategy. It's like Andy Stoll from Kaufman says. Probably, this is just a rule of thumb, but 80% of ecosystem building is the same. It's the 20% difference that really matters. So I would not presume to go and tell Denisse in Comina in Puerto Rico what is the best way, what her ecosystem needs to be a thriving ecosystem. What I do is a process of discovery, and then help the core principles of ecosystem building, mix with the unique cultural needs of Puerto Rico, which probably even has a lot of subcultures if you want to get more granular.
That's right.
And co-construct an ecosystem model that really is based upon the needs of that particular, community. This is why I've been pulling more things from the tech field into, community development work, such things like design thinking, which focuses on empathy mapping and customer discovery, user experience, and all those things, which start from, really addressing, how do you discover what the true and unique, needs are of a given population and determine, because Black people are going to be different wherever you go. Like, because think about Omaha is even different from Atlanta. When I went to Atlanta, they call that Chocolate City. They don't call Omaha that, trust me. They don't call us, they may call us a speck of pepper in a salt shaker, but they don't call us Chocolate City. And so even the experiences, while there are going to be certain consistencies across geographic areas, there's a lot of cultural and unique idiosyncratic issues. That's why ecosystem building, you have to look at it at multiple levels. But when you get down to the actual execution, the tactical execution of it, it's really going to be hyper local. And by local, I don't even necessarily mean geographic. It could be like a virtual locality, but it's always idiosyncratic and driven by the unique particular needs of that group that you're working with at that moment. And that is going to evolve over time.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. It sounds like we're talking niche strategy or hyper segmentation. So Stephanie, Dale just talked about the importance of co-creation and, with the community that you serve, and also capturing that feedback so that what you build with them, not for them, but with them, is actually capable of meeting or addressing their needs, and you being also in the learning process with them as you engage that feedback. Now, my understanding is that 5 of your sites has implemented SourceLink's technology, including the CRM system. How do you employ co-creation and ongoing feedback in your work at National Urban League?
Great, that's a good question. So I'm going to say, and I think I have some of my colleagues from some of our affiliates on the line as well. All 12 of our centers are actually using the CRM system, which we use to collect data to talk about our impact. But I want to just kind of add on to what Dell was saying. I think once you go through that discovery process, I think then you have to tailor your entrepreneur needs to what you've discovered. And so I think that's one of the things that the Urban League is very good at. A lot of times it's through the CRM data that we have a demographic picture of our client base. But in addition to that, anecdotally, every client is different. When you walk into one of our entrepreneurship centers, you go through an intake process, and that intake process helps uncover what the goals are, what the skill set is, what that entrepreneur is looking to do with their business. And through that process, you get to know that entrepreneur as a person. We tailor, and I think it's really important to say one size does not fit all. And so you have to tailor what it is you're doing for that person, what it is they're looking for is going to be different. And you need to tailor the skills and the services that you're providing, whether it's counseling, mentoring, training, to the individual needs. And all of our markets are different geographically. And then just, they cover different segments of the market. And people of color come in all different shapes and sizes, and all their businesses are different, and all their business needs are different as well. And so, you might have startup business in Las Vegas, you might have micro businesses in our Baltimore market, and our New Orleans market, or our Cincinnati market, where they're, certifying women-owned businesses or working with construction businesses. I mean, everybody's needs are different. And so I think one of the things that we do well is that we tailor what those needs are, whether it's through subject matter experts that are working with folks, to the individual clients, recognizing that everybody is different, and their needs are going to be varied. So,
thank you so much. And you just queued up my follow-on to Rodney, and of course, Rodney, you can weigh in on the original question as well. But Stephanie talked about also using the CRM system to capture information and so forth. For the benefit of practice and the listeners on the call right now, we have about 55 of us here. What are some of the strategies you all use at OHUB and in your other work for garnering that hyper-local and contextual insight that your diverse population offers to you to continue to add value to them and building that network?
Well, at OHUB, we pride ourselves on our go-to-market strategies and our ability to do outreach outside of traditional systems. A lot of times when programs, particularly in traditional economic development contexts, are established, they work through other proximate organizations. And we just have a direct-to-consumer approach. We use social media, we use Instagram, we use Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, we use the radio, TV, digital ads. And although we work with partners, we don't rely on them to bring people into our ecosystem. And I think that's something that we've just done, since our inception. And a lot of times folks will say, well, God, where did OHUB come from? They came out of nowhere. And, folks are like at their events or in their programs. And, we had 300 people apply for our coding program. And, we struggle to get 30 Black people. And it's like, you got to know how to market to our communities,
That's right.
and that's very important. So that's step one. And then step two, we incentivize people to give us data. No one wants to be prodded. No one, wants to be the next focus group. And, so we are always thinking of ways to get people to give us data. And I think because we offer a membership based model where membership has its privileges, and based upon how you engage with that membership process, you get access to certain privileges. And so if you give us your full, employment profile, then we put you in front of tech recruiters. If you don't, then we don't. If you want to get access to our accelerator where we write small checks and, we invest $50,000 into a startup, or to our venture fund that may follow on, invest more, you have to go through our program. And you don't just show up on day one like, hey, I'm good enough. I heard this program is for Black people, so let me in. Like, no, you still got to go through the process, period. And so I think because we use technology and use those systems, that gives us an edge. And then we're constantly reviewing the nuances of that data. And that's why, we today are truly seeing ourselves as a platform, and the platform then feeds the programs and then feeds the places, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. I follow you, brother, and I appreciate you. You're our resident data man today, so I want to ask you a follow-on question, and then we'll move over to a next question.
I need to point something out.
Oh, please go ahead.
And this is important. So there's a distinction. Like Rodney would clearly tell you, he's tech high growth oriented and has a strong rationale for that. And we need to understand that there's nuances to the world of ecosystem building. And as an emergent field, we have not done a good job of mapping out typologies of ecosystem building. So, you know, and Rodney has progressively converted me more closely aligned to his position towards ecosystem building than ever, from the simple fact that when you look at the issues of ethnic disparity and even gender disparity, you know, and the way that I put it is that it's very difficult, if impossible, to ever catch up with somebody if you're running the same speed as them, but you're already 50 yards behind. Like, you just perpetually be 50 yards behind as they continue to progress and you progress. Well, then what's the logical way that you actually catch up or you know, beat somebody that's ahead of you? You have to run faster. And the only way to do that, by and large, in American society, is through innovation and technology. And the production of innovation and technology-oriented firms that drive large-scale, you know, revenue growth. And it's not to say that we ignore these other ecosystems, because I focus on them and others focus on them, but we need to look. So Rodney talks about the capital stack, right? Like the diverse forms of capital that need to be deployed to support an ecosystem. We also have to talk about the actual entrepreneurial stack in your community too, and how you develop ecosystems around, to develop ecosystem approaches that actually drive the kind of change you talk. Last thing, and I'll let you get back to your questions. The unique thing I would say about OHub in Rodney's model is that he has developed one of the few, like he says, platform. He has developed one of the few immediately replicatable models from city that can be taken from city to city, which is another challenge of the field. SourceLink has a model from their, you know, their portal and others, but when it comes to this inclusive space, we really haven't seen a lot of emergent models where somebody can say, pick this up and plop it in your city. It's dynamic enough and it has a foundation and a process defined enough that you can, quote unquote, franchise it. So we got a lot of work to do in the field. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't lose that Urban League focuses on a segment of entrepreneurs that most likely is going to be unique to Rodney. Both are very much needed, but we need to be very considerate how we develop the ecosystems and the typologies to address both of those and understand the impact of the type of ecosystem that we produce on the actual economic development that we produce in diverse communities.
No, those are fantastic contributions, and they dovetail where I was going with how do we generate more front-end opportunities for Black and Brown entrepreneurs and leveraging data to understand if we're being successful at that. So no, that was spot on. And I just took a note here on the need for one of our scholars on the call here to start exploring typologies of ecosystem building, because that is a very important area to really understand what we're dealing with. So on the data, a lot of times we talk about needing to create more opportunities to have a funnel for more actors or activity to be driven in Black and Brown communities to go into business. But we also know that there's a lot of data that shows that once we're in business, we have culturally specific struggles staying in business. Like, for example, we talk about the circulation of the Black dollar not lasting more than a matter of 6 hours, whereas in other cultural communities, it may last multiple days or even up to a month when you look at other communities. How do we begin to let the data tell us and use strategies for sustaining progress once we've gotten folks into that funnel of going into business? And then how do we also get more people in business in the right fields that would allow them to catch up? And I'm going to pose that, I guess, to Rodney and Dell, just making a note. We have about 10 minutes left. And then my next question is going to go to Stephanie. You're muted, Rodney.
There you go. I really wish someone would figure out some AI to kind of like just unmute us on Zoom.
Maybe when your name is called, it unmutes.
Yeah, I think when you talk, it recognizes the voice because it says you're muted. So it recognizes it, it just doesn't unmute you. So
Touche.
Maybe we could let Zoom know about their inclusive product development would be helpful. You know, that piece is a constant iterative piece, because I think when you look at entrepreneurship in general, like let's take race and culture and gender out for a second, and you look at the concept of American entrepreneurialism, I think we've sort of rested on the laurels that we were the greatest nation in the world. And while we were resting on that success, there were smaller nations or more ambitious nations literally coming for market share or coming for our launch. So I think that
That's right.
the whole concept of American entrepreneurialism has to be revisited as a part of the American construct. The second thing is how entrepreneurialism is even positioned in socially disadvantaged communities. For instance, there's a lot of passion-based entrepreneurship push versus problem solving.
That's right.
You know, and like the passionate stuff we see on CEO, like, oh, if you're an entrepreneur, you can be wealthy and you can have these cars, you can have these houses and stuff. There's an overabundance of that, which I think can be a distraction, because the core of successful entrepreneurship is solving a problem that people are willing to pay for over and over again.
That's
so
right.
the next thing is we also have a segment of the population, particularly Black women, who leave corporate America because they reach a ceiling and they leave to become entrepreneurs. And the question could be, is that the right pivot for them? But at a certain point, they want to work for themselves because they're tired of having to climb up the ranks and deal with the nuances and the microaggressions that happen on a daily basis. So you have to balance why people are starting businesses, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, you know, for instance, look, it takes 90 days to develop a new habit. Most of us have been sheltering in place for over 90 days. We have new habits. We have new spending habits. So when you hear the statistics that 41% of Black businesses have gone out of business, and by Q4, only 7% of them that have a payroll will be able to meet their payroll, the reality of it is, it doesn't matter how much PPP, how many grants you get, at a certain point, if there's not a demand for the customers that you would have, then you don't have a business again. And so I think that a part of what we can do is put forth what business industries and what business opportunities, whether it be service-based, Main Street, government contracting, corporate supply diversity, or high growth, whatever your bailiwick is, folks need to know what those are. And so I think as ecosystem builders, from a broad stroke, you know, that's been traditionally focused on economic development, which is attraction and retention, is shifting to new venture creation, and then being able to support those entrepreneurs through the company building process, and then tracking, you know, how much capital did you raise or not raise in a period of time, tracking how many net new jobs you created after you were able to get contracts. Where did you get those contracts? Are they annually recurring? What percentage is one contract of your business? You know, all of those things matter in terms of actually tracking the outcome. And so in our guide, what Dell and I did was put forth what the actual metrics that can be measured in an ecosystem that would allow you to look back and go to your fiduciaries and say, listen, we had $1.25 million a year, and this is what we accomplished. You know, we had $5 million a year, and this is what we accomplished. And so that data helps you to actually continue to be sustainable.
Okay, thank you so much for that comprehensive response as well. I want to give our 100-pound question, our heavy question to Stephanie, because I know she's a heavy lifter. And this is going to address both the elephant in the room and the necessary work to help eat that elephant. We know that the whole point of having to even talk about inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystem building is because of the role that structural and systemic racism has played in our country since its inception. And so I want you to talk a little bit, Stephanie, about how that manifests as a opposing point in this work, but then also too, in terms of the work that needs to be done going forward for other cultural communities, for example, people of European descent. What is their role in this fight for racial and economic justice? as we work to close the racial wealth gap supporting Black and brown entrepreneurs?
So that is a heavy question, and I would say, we think about the whole reason that we're having this conversation because of the systemic racism and the fact that the playing field is not equitable, and we've had this conversation throughout the course of the last hour, and I think what I would point to is next steps in terms of what people can be doing who are not part of the minority community, let's say our European brothers and sisters. What can they be doing to help eradicate the systemic racism and help us progress? And I would say it's a couple things. The first is educate yourself, and a lot of folks, that look like me would probably say, it's really not my job to kind of teach and inform you as to what you should be doing, but I will help you out by saying, there's a lot of information out there. Conversations like this need to be taking place all the time. If you don't know, you need to find out. Educate yourself. You have people, who are presenters who've written books, who have done research. There's a lot of information out there that you need to avail yourself of. Continue these types of hard conversations with people in your community. You need to be out there advocating. A lot of the things that the National Urban League is engaged with, and we have a Washington Bureau who works with us on this, but we're out there educating ourselves and talking to people, whether they're in Washington or whether they're in state legislatures or local governments, about what it is we need. Talk to entrepreneurs, have these conversations with them. What is it that they need? What are the challenges? What are the concerns? What are the issues that they're dealing with? You need to know and understand them. If you don't understand something that's taken place or you've heard on this call, you need to find out more about that. You need to talk to folks like the presenters on the call and see what it is that you can be doing and what it is you need to learn more about. You need to engage more with organizations like OHUB and the National Urban League and find out more about what it is that we're doing and learn more about the work and assist in those communities, volunteer your time. So these are all things that I can think. I mean, and there are lots of books and reading materials. I won't go into those. You can look those up yourself. All you have to do is Google, inclusivity, social justice, racial wealth gap. There's a lot of information out there. You need to avail yourself of that, and you need to be having these conversations internally to figure out what else you can be doing. I welcome those conversations, and anybody who wants to reach out to me to talk more about how the Urban League is helping to impact minority entrepreneurs and work with them, can feel free to let me know. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephanie. And I know we're at the top of the half hour. And so I just want to acknowledge that there were one or two private questions that were sent to me that I'm sure our chat room warriors did not see because they came to me. And so hopefully we can get those questions out and follow up with those individuals at a later date so they're properly addressed. But with that, Rob, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm appreciative that all of you've been able to join us for this phenomenal panel conversation. And I'd like to say thank you for my esteemed panelists for embarking on this conversation with me. Rob, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lomax. And I also want to echo some very, very sincere gratitude to Stephanie, Rodney, Dell, and you, Lomax, for sharing your time and expertise and your thoughts about this incredibly important topic. I will say that this is just one step of what I hope will be, and what we are planning to be, many around this topic. It's incredibly important, and we're going to continue to find ways to talk about it and to help advance what's going on. And that's so I do want to make sure that everybody is aware of that, and then if you have ideas or want to get involved in this, to please let me know. One of the things I've been thinking about is maybe pulling together kind of like a committee of our affiliate network that are dedicated to this particular topic to really brainstorm and think about what we could do together. And so if that's of interest, please send me an email. And then I want to just thank everyone here for coming and for listening and participating. I really, really appreciate it. We will get the recording up here probably by tomorrow, and we'll share that with everyone. So thank you everyone for coming. Appreciate it, and have a great rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.